Hey, what's up, everybody? Christian here with another pfSense update video. So I know it's been several months since I've released a video. I think the last video that I uploaded coincided with the release of 2201 and pfSense Community Edition version 2.6, and also demonstrating the upgrade path from CE to Plus on white boxes, which has been a long requested feature. And that process of getting that infrastructure in place was no easy feat. The team worked very hard to make that happen, and we're really proud of the results. If you recall back from the early discussions that I had on my YouTube channel about 2201, which actually started back in late 2021, you'll remember that one of the big changes that we announced was the move from UFS, the Unix file system, to ZFS, or the zettabyte file system, the Z file system. And that change, initially, it didn't really have a lot of customer value besides, yeah, this is a more modern file system. It's more resilient to data corruption and unexpected power loss. But other than that, there really wasn't any new features that actually used that new infrastructure, that new file system that we had in place. But that has always been on the back of our minds on how can we use ZFS to deliver value adds to our customers and make the experience of managing pfSense and restoring it and backing it up a lot easier. Now, I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of how ZFS works, but the transition to ZFS is so much easier on paper than it was in reality. It required really a complete team effort and to make the transition from UFS to ZFS on the platforms that support ZFS, which are going to be the 64-bit platforms. I'm not going to go into the technicality behind why our 32-bit platforms don't support ZFS. If you want to read about ZFS on 32-bit and why that's not practical, you can do a Google search on that and find more about that. But on the platforms that do support ZFS, which are the 64-bit platforms, we have lots of plans for ways that we can use ZFS to make the process of administrating pfSense and backing it up and restoring it things that used to be high-risk operations, like performing an update or installing a package or making a tweak to the firewall rules, things that have the potential to really bring down your entire network. These are high-risk operations. One of the things that we've always wanted to do, quickly and very early, once we had ZFS in place, was to use the really awesome features of ZFS to make those high-risk operations zero-risk operations. So what I've been working on for the last about 2 months now is implementing ZFS boot environments as a core part of pfSense Plus. And what I'm going to do in this video is we're going to talk about what are ZFS boot environments, how do they work, and we're also going to demonstrate how they're going to radically change the way that you update pfSense and make changes to pfSense. Remember, things that used to be high-risk operations are now no-risk operations, because if anything goes wrong, all you have to do is, in some cases, just unplug pfSense and plug your appliance back in, and the system can automatically reboot into the last known good the last known good environment. So let's go ahead and jump into pfSense Plus. So this is my 4100, which I currently use at the edge of my network. So I've been living with this code for a while now. So that's kind of the way that I test. Not only the way that I test the WireGuard code, I live with it. I push a lot of traffic through it. The stuff that I work on, I also dog food incrementally all the time. So this is my actual home network 4100, and we're going to demonstrate boot environments here on it right now. The wife's actually out, so it's a good time to take down the network for a bit and show you guys how this works. So if you notice right on the dashboard, there's now a new section under System Information called Boot Environment. And this little section here will only be displayed on systems that actually support ZFS boot environments. Now, there's one little caveat to this, in that you might be running ZFS, but because of some of the changes that needed to be made to the ZFS layout and the way that the data sets are mounted, we actually had to make several changes to the ZFS layout. Currently, there is no upgrade path to migrate data sets and data around, because that's very, very dangerous. And if things go wrong, you could be left with a system that just outright does not boot and can be actually tricky to even recover a configuration file from. So as it stands right now, to get access to ZFS boot environments as a feature, you're going to need to re-image your pfSense installations. But this is a one-time thing, and once you do that, ZFS boot environment support will be enabled, and you'll be able to see this new section on the system information widget. Now, there's also a new page under the system dropdown menu called Boot Environments. Now, this page, if you are running on a system that doesn't support ZFS boot environments, which would be either a UFS system or an older ZFS system that doesn't have the correct data set layout, you're going to see a little warning that just says the system doesn't support ZFS boot environments. And the plan is we're going to add a link to that page to our docs so that you can get instructions on how to actually re-image your device and update so that you have the correct ZFS layout so that your system can support boot environments. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about what is a boot environment. Well, in the world of ZFS, we first should talk about ZFS snapshots and ZFS clones. Now, a ZFS snapshot is almost exactly like it's described on the tin. It is a point-in-time snapshot of a file system at a particular point in time. Now, there's one caveat to snapshots, and that is that they are read-only. So when you create a snapshot, you're basically telling ZFS to record the object tree of the blocks and the files that of that particular file system at that particular point in time, and it marks those blocks so that they won't be deleted, but it allows the system to sort of recalculate what the data should be at that particular point in time. Now, granted, that's a read-only copy, but it is a copy nonetheless. And that copy, that snapshot that's made, is what's really cool about ZFS is that ZFS snapshots are very, very, very cheap to make. In fact, creating a ZFS snapshot at a technical level is about as fast and as easy as saving a file to disk. It's very, very quick. Like I said, ZFS decouples the actual storage on the disk versus the hierarchy of those blocks. And if you can store the structure and leave the data alone, so when you create a snapshot, you're not actually moving large blocks of data around. You're just marking blocks as being used by a snapshot or by a file system, so that ZFS is not going to touch those blocks. So a ZFS snapshot, when you create it, initially consumes no additional space. Now, that's not entirely true. There's a little bit of space, but we're talking on the order of kilobytes, not megabytes or gigabytes. So just to give you a demonstration of that, this is the new user interface for managing boot environments. And if I wanted to create one, all I have to do is click Quick Create, and notice that it creates a new boot environment. Now, what this just did in the background was it creates a snapshot, so a ZFS snapshot, and then it creates a ZFS clone that originates from that snapshot. So clones are very different from ZFS snapshots in that a clone is a writable copy of a file system. So in the world of ZFS, you can create snapshots, and then you can use those snapshots to seed, so to speak, a clone. So the state of that clone, that cloned data set, originates from a snapshot. And that gives us the power of being able to create snapshots or boot environments or clones very, very quickly, and also being able to destroy them just as quickly. Because again, it really is as easy from the system's perspective as just saving the tree of objects deep down into ZFS and just saving those pointers and writing it to a file. I mean, that's pretty much the ease of making this work. So if you've ever used things like VM snapshots on VMware, you know that creating a snapshot there can take quite a bit of time. Now, granted, it's doing more than just saving the file system state; it's also saving the memory state and that sort of thing. But it still takes quite a bit of time. ZFS snapshots are worlds apart from that kind of snapshot. They're very fast to create and they're very fast to delete. And initially, as you just saw, they consume basically no additional space. So when I just created this new boot environment, you can see that the space consumed by that boot environment is 216K. So it's very, very tiny. And I can create new ones. Notice that they're very quick to create, and I can delete them just as quickly. So that's a really cool feature that is provided by the power of ZFS. And that ZFS snapshots allow us to capture the state of the file system at a particular point in time. And these snapshots are used to create writable clones, and those clones only consume additional space once their data actually begins to diverge from the snapshot that they originated from. So it does a lot, ZFS deep down does a lot to do deduplication and to recognize that a block might be used in multiple places, and being able to track that so that once that block is no longer being consumed, that data can sort of be given back to the pool for consumption by new blocks of data. So ZFS is incredibly smart. ZFS is really, really cool. If you've never really studied ZFS and the way that it works internally, I recommend you doing that. It is a really cool architecture, and these features, ultimately, we're using them to hopefully deliver a really awesome value add to our customers that we're really excited about. So that's pretty much a high level of how boot environments work. Again, the take-home points are they're very cheap to create, they're very cheap to delete, they consume no additional space when you create them, and they only consume space once the contents of their file system actually begins to diverge from the snapshot that they originated from. So that's pretty cool. So what does this actually allow you as a pfSense user or an administrator? What power does this actually give you as a pfSense user? Well, the first thing that I want to do is I want to update this particular pfSense box. So this is currently on a build from May 3rd, so yesterday, but you can see that we have a new build available that was built early this morning. Now, this is internal. If you're looking at snapshots, public-facing snapshots, you're not going to see this. I think the last snapshot that was available publicly was from last week. So you're not going to see this. So don't worry if you don't see an update to the May 5th build or the May 4th build. Don't worry. It's not anything wrong with your setup. It's just the fact that we haven't published these yet. This is internal at the moment. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on Update. And the process is going to look pretty much the same, but there are a few changes that are happening behind the scenes that are worth noting. So while this happens, I'm going to just kind of talk a little bit. So the first thing that happens here in the upgrade process is we create an automatic rollback boot environment. And you can see I'm kind of holding up the update status because it likes to scroll to give you, real-time information on what's going on. But you can see the first line there says creating automatic rollback boot environment. And what that's doing, or what that did actually, is before we ever touched the running system, we saved a boot environment. So that boot environment represents pfSense as it existed right before we started to actually update packages and actually manipulate the system. Then we proceeded through the normal upgrade process that you have that you're expecting. We update the repositories, we install the packages, and ultimately we reboot the system. Now, there's one more step here that's important to consider, and that is we need to make sure that we reboot into the boot environment that we are updating. Otherwise, it's possible that you can actually set the next boot environment to be the boot environment that is not the one being updated. So in the world of boot environments, there's actually like two major kinds of concepts here. There's the current boot environment, which is the boot environment that you're currently operating in, and then there is the next boot environment. And the next boot environment is simply the boot environment that's going to be used when the system reboots. And because of the way that we update pfSense in a multi-stage process, it's important that when we start a update that we don't leave that update dangling or hanging, or incomplete. So what we do here is just a sanity check that we make sure that we activate the correct boot environment, which is the one that we are currently updating, so that when the system updates, it reboots into the correct environment, and that update is considered complete. So this is just a way to force the system into ensuring that a user doesn't accidentally, wander into a situation where they inadvertently had the current boot environment differing from the next boot environment and leaving an update kind of hanging. So this more or less, the upgrade process from the end user's perspective hasn't changed. It's going to update the same way. But when we log in to pfSense, you're going to notice a few things. So first of all, we are now running this new build from May 4th, so this morning. But if we go back to System and Boot Environments, you will see that there is a new boot environment called Auto. So this boot environment here is Auto, and it takes the name of the boot environment that it was derived from, and then throws a timestamp in there. And you can see that the base version of this particular boot environment is the build from May 3rd. So that was the build that we were just running. And now the version that we're currently running is the build from May 4th. So you can see that we have two, and this one was automatically created by System Update. Now let's just pretend for a moment that something went very wrong and I wasn't able to, I needed to roll back for some reason. All I have to do is I can do it in a couple of ways. I can either activate the rollback boot environment, and then if I just reboot pfSense, it's going to automatically boot back into that environment, that particular version. Or I can just go to diagnostics and reboot, and I can just choose the boot environment that I want to reboot into and click submit. And the system is going to automatically reboot into that boot environment. So we're going to let this reboot here, and we should come back into the build from May 3rd. All right, so let's go ahead and log back in. And you can see that we are now running the build from May 3rd. So we can go back to boot environments, and you can see that we're running this particular build here. So if I wanted to, if I wanted to reboot back into the current, into the latest boot environment, all I have to do is just reactivate it. And we can go ahead and reboot back into that, because that's ultimately where I want to be. I want to be running the latest version. So we're going to reboot one more time. All right, so we're back up. So I'm going to go ahead and log back in. And you can see that we are back to the current build, which is the build from this morning, May 4th. So that is currently the way that you can use boot environments to easily roll back to a previous instance of pfSense. So this is not only controllable through the user interface. When you actually have more than one boot environment, there'll be a new option on the pfSense bootloader, the FreeBSD bootloader, which is the first kind of the first opportunity that you have as an administrator to actually twiddle knobs during the boot up process. So the FreeBSD loader has an option for boot environments that if you click on, or if you enter, I think number 8, you can actually choose the boot environment that you want to boot into early in the boot process. So let's say, for example, that an update was so broken that you couldn't even get as far as the user interface. All you would need to do is plug a serial console in and go to that loader and just choose the boot environment that you want to boot into, and you should be back up and running in no time. So obviously this is really cool right off the bat. We have the ability to roll back from updates, but we also have the ability to roll back from configuration changes as well. So let's just kind of do something that's a little bit crazy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a boot environment. And I just clicked quick create, which just very quickly just takes a copy or a snapshot of the current boot environment, makes a clone of that, and then blesses it as a boot environment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on Edit, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to say good config, and we're just going to click on Save. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend like I'm an administrator, and I'm going to make a potentially catastrophic change to the firewall. Maybe I need to add a firewall rule or modify a firewall rule, but I'm not really certain how my environment's going to react to it. But I do know that the current config is functional. It might not be what I want, but it at least is functional. So what I'm going to do in order to kind of save myself from maybe even a potential, drive to my on-site, business or whatever, I'm going to go ahead and create a new boot environment, and I'm going to call it good config. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate that. So what I just did is I just said, okay, if anything goes wrong, if I unplug pfSense and plug it back in, the next time it reboots is that it's going to boot into this good config state. So what I can do is I can go back and start monkeying with things. So let's go to firewall rules, and I'm just going to be, really crazy here, and I'm just going to lock myself out of the firewall. So I'm going to go ahead and disable some firewall rules on some VLANs and my LAN, and we're just going to shut that down. And why not? We'll go ahead and disable WireGuard. And actually, I think I already have lost connection here. So yep, I am now locked. I've locked myself out. I was not thinking what I was doing. Oh, maybe not. Let me go ahead and drop some states here. Let's go ahead and reset the states. I really want to lock myself out of my own firewall for some reason. So let's go ahead and do that. So I've reset the state table. So if I try to ping, let's see. Yep, I have now locked myself out of my firewall. Well, that's inconvenient, but I can recover from it very easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quick restart my 4100, and all I'm going to do is unplug the power and plug it back in. So give me a second. All right, so I have power cycled my 4100, so now we're just waiting for it to come back online. And remember, I activated the good config. So that was my insurance policy, that if anything goes wrong, all I had to do was restart pfSense somehow. In this case, I just pulled the power. But you can sort of imagine scenarios where you might be an MSP and something goes wrong, and it might be a lot easier to instruct someone on site to unplug and replug the power. That's a lot easier for non-technical people to do than actually trying to break out a serial console and trying to get back in. So again, you can really start to see a whole new world of how you could administer pfSense and recover from potential footgun. In this case, all I needed to do was tell someone to pull the power on a box and to plug it back in. And when it comes to, I should have access again to the firewall. And you can see that I'm back. So again, notice that the current boot environment is that good config, and that was what I wanted. So that means by definition, this particular boot environment here is broken. So if I were to reboot back into, in this case, it's called default, that's not going to be where I want to land. So that is now a broken config, and all I have to do to get rid of it is just hit delete, and it's gone. So I've now recovered from that potential error that I made as an administrator. So boot environments are really, really cool. And again, we're not done with this. This is only our first attempt at providing this feature. We're getting really close to a beta, so obviously we're code complete. So this is what it's going to. The features that you see here are what's going to be available here in a few weeks when we release 2205. But I already have a list of some things that I'm thinking about in order to make this process a little bit more seamless, like adding hooks so that, if you want, when you make configuration changes, it can automatically, create boot environments for you and even activate them on your behalf. Right now, it's sort of a manual thing, but just recall that all you have to do is, create a boot environment and activate it, and then you're sort of safe to, do anything that you want. You can go in and add packages. You can go in and, really do, anything to the system. And if for any reason something goes wrong, all you have to do is reboot the system somehow, some way. And that could be asking somebody on site, hey, can you pull the power on the firewall and plug it back in? And if they do that, it's going to come right back to the state that it was in before you started to twiddle knobs and to break things. So anyway, I'm really excited about this feature. Netgate, we're all really excited about this feature. It has the potential to really change the way that you back up and restore and recover from potential issues. ZFS provides a lot more facilities than just snapshots and clones and boot environments. It's also, technically possible to actually download a boot environment and actually save that, on your computer and actually restore a boot environment. So ZFS has this concept known as send and receive, that you can actually take a data set or data sets and actually, save that, serialize it and save it as a file, and then, upload it again. So there's a lot more stuff that I'm going to explore over the next, several months to, mature this feature. But right now, it's really cool, and I'm really excited about it. I hope you are too. So let me know what you think. I look forward to getting the beta released to you guys so that you can actually test this out for yourself. So far, the testing is going really well, and the feature works really well. In fact, just a few days ago, there was a bug that caused a kernel panic that was unrelated to boot environments, and I updated pfSense, and pfSense started the boot loop, and I quickly recovered. I just plugged a serial console in and chose the rollback boot environment, and I was right back up and running within no time. So this feature has already saved me, so hopefully you can find it useful as well. So let me know what you think in the comments below. And again, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, I would love if you hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button too if you liked it. If not, that's okay too. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks. Bye.